The wind carried the scent of blood and sweat through the auction yard, but it was the girl's voice that cut deepest. Don't take her, she's only 3. Her dress hung in rags. Her lip was split, yet she stood between her baby sister and a world that only knew how to take. Then, through the murmurs of coins and cattle calls, a shadow moved. A rancher stepped forward, and everything changed. The sun had baked the town square to cracked bone. Dust rose in lazy spirals where booth-eels shuffled, and flies clung to sweating brows like they, too, waited to see what would happen next. The platform creaked under the weight of a moment that had stretched too long, and the girl stood barefoot on splintered wood, one arm looped protectively around the toddler's tiny shoulders. She looked no older than 9, but her eyes had the guarded stare of someone who knew what it meant to be counted, weighed, sold. Dirt streaked her cheeks, and her dress was 2 sizes too big, tied at the waist with a fraying rope. She held herself upright with a pride that didn't belong in this place. Like maybe, somewhere in her bones, she still believed in something more than surviving the day. The toddler clung to a rag doll, missing one eye, and stared blankly at the men gathered below. She didn't cry. She just blinked, confused, as the world arranged itself around her fate. 2 bodies, the auctioneer called out, voice oily as lamp grease. Sturdy one's good for work. The little one's a tag-along, but she'll fetch smiles if not wages. Starting bids, $5. The crowd didn't laugh. They didn't shift or murmur. They just looked like they always did, half with hunger, half with shame. The girl took a step forward, shaking now, lips cracked. She pointed to the toddler. Don't take her, she said. Her voice trembled but didn't break. She's only 3. Someone spat into the dust. Another man shifted his weight, looked away. No one answered. A tall fellow with a bad-shaped sunburn on his vest stepped forward. His belt creaked with every step. I'll take the small one. Just the small one. No, the girl said. She's not yours to claim, child. She's not yours to take. The auctioneer raised a brow, slow and theatrical. Now hold on. We don't need dramatics. Let's not forget who's in charge of where these young uns end up. Either both go, or we separate. Makes no difference to me. The girl dropped to her knees beside the toddler, wrapping her arms tight around her. The crowd watched in silence as she bent her head low, whispering something into her sister's hair. Dust clung to them, both like grief. One fly landed on the girl's cheek, and she didn't even flinch. At the edge of the crowd, a man dismounted. No one saw where he came from. One minute the world was holding its breath, the next, he was there. Hat low over his brow, coat hanging heavy with trail dust. Horse still breathing hard from a long ride. He said nothing. The girl looked up, eyes scanning faces, searching for mercy and finding none, until her gaze landed on him. A flicker passed through her, a twitch of something old and feral. Hope. He moved slowly, like someone who'd learned not to startle animals or ghosts. Each step tapped deliberate against the wooden boards. When he reached the platform, he looked not at the auctioneer, not at the men behind him, but directly at the girl. Put her down, he said, voice dry as prairie wind. The auctioneer blinked. Say again. The man didn't raise his voice, didn't draw a weapon, just stood there, dusty and still. I'm taking both. A ripple passed through the crowd. Some chuckled. One man muttered something about fools and orphans and the price of soft hearts. The auctioneer forced a smile. We got a system here, friend. Ain't no charity. The man unpinned something from inside his coat. It clinked when it hit the ground, metal, circular, worn from time and war. A badge. Old, maybe expired, but heavy with memory. I ain't here to argue, he said. I'm here to take what's mine. Silence stretched. The auctioneer glanced around, calculating. The crowd offered no support, only indifference. No one wanted trouble, not over 2 girls. Not with a man who looked like he'd bled more than most men lived. $10, the auctioneer said flatly. The man reached into his coat, pulled out a coin pouch, and dropped it on the platform. It hit like judgment. The girl didn't move. The man knelt beside her, careful, slow. Can you ride? He asked. She didn't answer at first. Her body stayed wrapped around the toddler, arms trembling now. She looked up at him again. Whatever she saw in his face made her nod, once sharp. He stood, helped her to her feet. Then, as she scooped the toddler into her arms, he turned to the crowd. Anyone got a problem, speak now. No one did. They walked through the gap, like it had been waiting for them. Past the auctioneer, past the heat-shimmered stairs, past a place where fate had nearly been written in dust and silence. When they reached his horse, he lifted the toddler into the saddle first, then helped the girl up behind. He swung up last, heavy and slow, and turned the animal north, away from the town. No one followed. The girl clung to the child and stared into the horizon like it might have something better to offer than what they left behind. Behind them, the town exhaled. But the man didn't look back. Not even once. The prairie rolled out before them, a faded quilt of browning grass and long-forgotten trails. The horse moved steady beneath them, hooves thudding rhythmically over dirt too dry to hold footprint. The sun had slid lower, bleeding copper across the sky, and wind carried the scent of something scorched and ancient. It was the kind of quiet that wasn't peace, just a pause between storms. The toddler had fallen asleep, her face pressed into the man's coat, fingers curled in the fabric like it might disappear. Her rag doll, the one-eyed thing, dangled from the saddle by a threadbare arm, bouncing with every step. The older girl rode behind them, clinging more to the child than the man. Her knees dug into the horse's flank, and her jaw was clenched tight. Every bump in the road, every rustle in the grass, made her flinch. She hadn't said a word since they'd left the auction block. They rode like that for hours, wordless, cautious, the only sound the creak of leather and the tired breath of a horse that had seen better days. When the sun finally dipped beneath the hills, the man reined the horse to a stop beside a trickle of water barely worthy of the word creek. He dismounted without a sound and lifted the sleeping toddler into his arms. She stirred, whimpered, but didn't wake. He set her down gently on a bed of dried grass, covered her with his coat. The girl slid off the horse, landing light as a cat. She stayed back, eyes flicking over the sparse landscape, scanning for traps, for eyes in the brush, for things she'd learned could hurt you if you weren't careful. She didn't trust silence. She didn't trust men. He started a fire, small, shielded by rocks. Enough for warmth, but not enough for notice. He opened a saddlebag and pulled out a tin of beans, a crust of bread. He didn't offer words, just tore the bread in half, placed one piece on a flat stone near her, and returned to tending the fire. She waited 5 long minutes before picking it up. They sat on opposite sides of the flames, shadows flickering across their faces. The toddler snored softly behind them. Coyotes howled in the distance, far enough not to matter. The sky swelled with stars. "You gonna sell us later?" the girl asked suddenly. Her voice cracked, too dry, too long and used, but her eyes didn't waver. He shook his head. "No. You're not gonna give her away?" "No." She stared hard, lips trembling, then hardened them again. Men say one thing, then do another. He didn't argue, didn't try to defend himself or explain. Just stared into the fire, hands clasped around a tin cup. After a while she asked, "Then why'd you take us?" He looked up, not startled, just slow, like he was sifting through something heavy before speaking. "Because someone should have stopped it," he said. "And I was there." She blinked once. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "We were with a wagon train. Got hit outside San Gallo. My ma, she ran with my sister. Got shot in the back." Her hand moved toward the toddler, but didn't touch her. "I tried to cover her face so they wouldn't see she was young. But they saw anyway." He said nothing, but something in his shoulders folded inward. The girl narrowed her eyes. "You were in the war?" "Some of it." "Which side?" "Wrong one." She let that hang in the air. It didn't feel like a confession, more like a splinter slowly working its way out. "People know your face," she said after a moment. One man looked like he'd seen a ghost. Maybe he had. She didn't press further. She wrapped her arms around her knees, staring into the fire. For the first time since they'd met, she stopped looking over her shoulder. The toddler stirred, let out a soft moan, and rolled toward the fire. The girl was on her feet instantly, kneeling beside her sister, soothing her with soft words and a palm to her cheek. The man watched her move, too sharp, too practiced for a child her age. "You got a name?" he asked. She didn't answer at first. Then, carefully, "Most folks call me nothing, but Ma used to call me Wren." "Wren," he repeated, like tasting the word. "I'm not much for talking, but I don't mean you harm." She gave a shrug that wasn't a shrug, just a muscle twitch pretending to be apathy. Words don't mean much. He nodded once, accepting that. The fire burned low. The wind picked up. The land around them breathed like an old animal, vast, tired, never tamed. "You got a place you're going?" she asked, surprising even herself. He stared past her, toward the northern ridge where stars melted into the horizon. "Used to be a place. Still mine, far as I know. Been empty a long time. A ranch. Of sorts." She thought about that. Then, "Are you going to leave us there?" "No," he said, and his voice cracked now, quiet and hoarse. "Not unless you want me to." That sat between them for a while. "You got any other people?" she asked. "No." Wren looked at the toddler, who was breathing steady again, safe under the coat. Then back at the man. "Maybe we could stay a little, just till spring." His answer came slow, deliberate. "You can stay as long as you need." Something shifted in her face, not trust, not yet, but the tightness in her jaw lessened. She pulled the coat closer around the toddler, then laid down beside her. She didn't say good night. He didn't expect her to. Later, long after the fire died and sleep settled over the two girls like a second skin, the man sat alone, rifle resting across his knees. He listened to the wind, the crack of settling earth, the distant cry of some nocturnal hunter. The night pressed close, thick with memory. He hadn't lied. The ranch was still there, nestled up against the ridge, hidden from the roads that carried men and their sins. But it carried ghosts. Ghosts he wasn't sure he was ready to face. Still, he'd taken two girls from a place that had already decided their worth, and now they rode with him. That meant something. He looked at the sleeping forms, curled close together like roots too tangled to separate. He hadn't protected his own once. Maybe this time he could do better. The road vanished long before they reached it. What was left of it, ruts faded by time, weeds growing up through sun-cracked earth, led to a hollow in the hills where the wind whispered different things. Here, the air changed. Cooler. Still. As if even nature had learned to hold its breath. The ranch slouched between two bluffs, its bones visible beneath the peeling skin of paint and weather rot. One shutter hung by a single hinge, flapping in the breeze like a broken wing. Fence posts leaned in surrender. The barn, half collapsed, stood like a drunk too proud to sit. He didn't say anything as they rode in, just pointed the horse toward the house and dismounted. Wren slid off with practiced ease, then turned and caught the toddler as she stumbled from a saddle, legs too sleepy to hold her. "This it?" Wren asked. He nodded. "This place yours?" He paused, looked over the ruin. "What's left of it?" The front door groaned open, and dust exploded from the hinges. Inside, the air was stale, thick with silence and old wood. Wren stepped in cautiously, holding her sister's hand tight. The furniture was still there, barely. A table scarred with cuts and burn marks, one chair missing a leg, a bookshelf empty, but for a single boot and a jar of dried-up ink. On the mantel above the fireplace, a rusted horseshoe and a child's drawing clung to the wall, with a nail driven too deep. She crossed the room and touched the paper, brittle now, faded. A stick-figure family, drawn in colored chalk. 3 people. One small, one medium, one tall. All smiling. The name, Elia, scribbled at the bottom corner. Wren turned. "Yours." He looked away. It was. They didn't ask more. Some wounds didn't like the light. He showed them to the bedroom, cleared off the cot, laid down old quilts still smelling faintly of tobacco and sage. Wren tucked the toddler in without a word. The man left them alone. That night, he sat on the porch with a cup of water and an unloaded rifle across his knees. The wind played through the grass like fingers on a memory. The hills were quiet, but it wasn't peace. Not yet. In the morning, Wren found him in the garden. Or what used to be one. He was pulling up the skeletal remains of corn stalks, dry as paper. She didn't ask why he bothered. Instead, she picked up a spade and started helping. By noon, they'd cleared 2 long rows. He turned the soil. She found worms, showed them to her sister like treasure. The toddler laughed. They didn't speak much. But in the quiet, something settled. Later, Wren found the loft above the barn. It had a trunk in the corner, bound in leather straps and dust. Inside, clothes folded by a woman's hand, a faded shawl, a journal with the first few pages torn out, and under it all, a tiny pair of boots, no bigger than her hand. She didn't tell him she'd found it. But she saw him glance at the barn that evening, eyes lingering on the loft window. That night, a rider came. They heard the hoofbeats before they saw him. Slow, unhurried, like someone who didn't need to rush to bring trouble. The man stepped onto the porch, rifle raised but not aimed. His hat shadowed most of his face, but his voice was clear. "You got company, Elias?" The man stiffened. Wren, watching through the window, caught the name and froze. "Didn't think you'd come back here," the rider continued. "Not after what happened at Smoke Ridge." Elias didn't flinch. "I'm not looking for trouble." "Funny thing," the rider said. Neither were they. There was a pause. Long waited. "What do you want?" Elias asked. Word spreading. "Folks say you bought 2 girls out of Dawson Hollow. Some say one of 'em's got blood ties to a man who scalped settlers back in '74. Others say you're building a gang again. I don't know what to believe, but I know folks are listening. They're children. Children with ghosts trailing behind 'em. Same as you." The rider tipped his hat back. His face was older than it should have been, lines carved deep by sun and regret. "I ain't here to kill you," he said. "Not tonight. But I ain't alone in thinking you don't get to play homesteader and expect the past to stay buried. You made choices. So did that girl's people. Trouble's coming, whether you want it or not." Then he rode off. Inside, Wren sat on the floor beside the hearth, her knees drawn up tight. Elias didn't look at her. He just walked past, poured himself a glass of well water, and stood at the window watching dust rise where the rider disappeared. "You gonna tell me what Smoke Ridge was?" she asked. He took a long drink. Then, quietly, "A place where I followed orders I shouldn't have." She looked at him differently now, not afraid, but measuring. "They killed families there," she said. "Not a question." "So did we." Outside, wind pushed the porch swing into motion, creaking like a bad memory. The house felt suddenly smaller, like the walls were leaning in to hear better. "That rider," she said. "He said people are coming." "They are. For me. For both of us." She didn't cry, didn't tremble, just nodded, sharp and certain. Then she stood and walked into the bedroom, lay down beside her sister, and stared at the ceiling. Elias didn't follow. He stayed by the window, watching a night gather that felt like it was waiting to swallow something. By morning, the wind had changed. He spent the day reinforcing the porch, checking the barn for tools still sharp enough to cut. Wren gathered stones, stacked them near the root cellar entrance. They didn't speak about it, but each action was a shared sentence in a language older than words. Prepare. That evening, she brought him the child's boots. "These hers?" she asked. He took them from her like they might fall apart if he held them wrong. His eyes burned, but no tears fell. "She was 5. Wren nodded. "I'm 9. "I know. I can shoot." He didn't ask how she knew. Didn't doubt her either. He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time she saw something she hadn't expected. Fear. Not of her, not of the men riding toward them, but of losing something again. "You're not her," he said. "But I see her when I look at you, and that scares the hell out of me." She didn't say anything, just stood there, letting him see her for who she was. "I don't want to lose you," he said. "Then don't," she whispered. Behind them, the toddler slept with her doll tucked under her chin, unaware of the storm coiling beyond the hills. The night came again, still and thick, but the ranch no longer felt hollow. It felt ready. The air turned metallic before dawn. Wren woke to the smell of smoke, barely a whisper, not fire, not yet, but the kind that rode in on men's coats after they'd lit torches and gritted their teeth against the dark. She sat up slow, instinct sharp, eyes scanning shadows before her mind caught up. Elias was already standing near the window, rifle in hand. He didn't speak, just nodded once, grim, as if the hour they'd braced for had finally stepped into the yard. Outside, hooves stirred dust. Maybe 4 riders, maybe 6. Wren couldn't tell. The sound came in waves, boots hitting dirt, harnesses clinking, horses exhaling like dragons in the cold. She reached for the pistol he'd given her 3 days earlier. It was heavy in her hand, but not unfamiliar now. She didn't tremble. The toddlers still slept, curled in blankets like none of this was happening. "I want you and her in the root cellar," Elias said, not turning from the window. Wren shook her head. "Not hiding." "You're 9. I've killed a coyote. These ain't coyotes." She stepped forward. "You said you wouldn't lose me." He looked at her, pain stitched in every line on his face. "That's why I want you alive." A voice called out from beyond the yard. It echoed off the hills like it belonged here. Elias Creed. "Step on out. We're not here for a war, but we ain't shy about starting one either." Elias didn't answer. The voice again, closer now. "You got something that don't belong to you. Girls kin to a man who put 4 settlers in the ground. You're harboring her. We want what's owed." Wren's jaw tightened. Her sister stirred, rubbed her eyes. The doll slid from her arms. Elias watched the tiny movement like it might break him. "They'll burn the house," he said. Wren stood straighter. "Then we make them regret it." He let out a slow breath, proud and terrified all at once. Outside, another voice joined the first, coarser, meaner. "Or maybe you want to see what we'll do to that little one. Sell her proper this time. Bet there's folks in Del Toro still pay good money." Elias moved before Wren could. He kicked the door open, stepped onto the porch. His rifle was up, steady. Wren followed him to the threshold, pistol raised, breath held tight in her chest. 6 men, mounted. One had a bottle of kerosene. Another held a match in his teeth. Faces half covered by scarves, but not enough to hide the grins. Grins of men who thought they'd already won. "I told you to leave this alone," Elias said. His voice was calm, hollow, like the bottom of a well. "You told me a lot of things," the rider said. "Like Smoke Ridge was just orders. That's why we didn't kill you then. But now you're playing daddy to a savage's child." "She's a child. That's all she is." "No," the man said. "She's a reminder." Then the match struck. The bottle flew. Elias fired. The match never landed. The first man fell backward off his horse, dead before he hit the ground. Gunfire cracked through the stillness. Splinters exploded from the porch railing. Wren dropped to her knees and fired twice, missed the first, hit the second square in the thigh. Screams. Hooves pounding. Someone tossed another bottle. This one caught the side of the barn, flames licking up dry boards like they'd been waiting. Elias moved like a man who'd fought death before and come away shivering. Each shot he took landed. 3 men down. One fled screaming. Another tried to flank the house and ran straight into Wren's bullet. The last one dismounted. He was taller than the rest, slower, his hands deliberate. He didn't bother with cover. Just walked forward, shotgun in one hand, hate carved into the set of his mouth. "You always were a coward, Creed," he spat. "Hiding behind women, behind children, behind badges that don't shine anymore." Elias lowered his rifle slightly. "You had a daughter, didn't you, Webb?" The man stopped, blinked. "She died at Smoke Ridge. I remember her now. Blonde. 11. You told me she was in the house." "I begged you," Webb whispered. "And I listened too late." They stood facing each other, ghosts wearing skin. "Then you know why I can't let this go," Webb said. Elias nodded. "I do." He stepped forward, weapon raised again. And then he dropped it. "Elias," Wren's voice broke. He turned back toward her. "You keep her safe. Both of you." Webb raised the shotgun. There was no flinch in either man. Just a final breath between them. Gunfire roared. Elias stumbled, staggered, fell to one knee. Blood bloomed across his shirt like a rose too fast to admire. But Webb was on the ground, not moving. Wren rushed forward. Elias coughed, hands pressed to his ribs. He was right, he said. I was a coward. But not today. She dropped beside him. Don't die. He smiled through blood. You got the deed in that box, under the bed. Your name's on it now. I scratched it there last week. I don't care about the land. It's not the land. It's the chance. His eyes fluttered. She grabbed his hand. Dirt under her fingernails, blood on her knuckles. You stay, she whispered. He looked at her, once more. You're a good shot. And then he stilled. The barn burned behind them, throwing orange into the morning. The wind shifted. Fire curled back on itself and began to die. The sun rose over the hills like it had every other day, indifferent to blood or sorrow. Days passed. She buried him near the orchard, beneath a crooked apple tree that hadn't borne fruit in years. She planted wildflowers. The toddler helped. The doll sat at the base of the marker like a sentinel. The house was quiet now, but not empty. Wren patched the porch, chased off a wolf one night, learned how to change a saddle strap. Sometimes in the mornings, she stood at the edge of the field and watched the wind move through the grass. Like it carried words. Like maybe Elias was still talking to her through it. One day, a woman arrived, tall, leathery skin, medicine bags slung across her back. She came without question, offered no name. Just looked at the girls, then the house, then the grave. She nodded once, solemn. Wren didn't ask why she came. Just handed her a shovel and pointed toward the garden. They had a harvest to grow, and a home to keep. Her sister toddled after the one-eyed doll, hair tangled, feet bare. Once she'd cried on an auction block. Now she laughed in the dirt. And Wren, no longer just a girl, knew what it meant to stay.